Hello, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar that focuses on the recently released COVID-19 Disposition Frequently Asked Questions FAQ version 2. Version 2 of the FAQ was released last month and provides detailed supplemental guidance to accompany version 2 of the COVID-19 Programmatic Deadlines Policy, which was released at the end of March 2003. Webinars on the updated programmatic deadline policy were also conducted in April, and the information for those presentations can be found on our grants portal platform, along with a recording of the webinar on our YouTube channel. FEMA first issued the COVID-19 Disposition FAQ version back in April 2022. Version 2 provides updated information on equipment and supply disposition and includes additional information on disposition and disposal requirements for equipment and supplies and demobilization, including warehousing costs for all emergency and major disaster declarations for the COVID-19 pandemic. As unprecedented as the COVID-19 pandemic was in the early days and months of 2020 and 2021, FEMA recognizes disposition and disposal will be equally unique for applicants to traverse in accordance with federal grant requirements. In recognition of the challenges with closing projects and ultimately COVID-19 pandemic emergencies and disasters, FEMA has provided multiple new policy flexibilities in this FAQ, which we'll go over during today's presentation. The PA program's North Star. Now that the COVID-19 incident period has ended, FEMA continues to transition to a new phase of support for applicants and understands the closeout process will require a lot of work and effort. The agency also sees this time as an opportunity to share and embrace a new North Star for the PA program and transform how we all work together to serve communities. The PA North Star shares the same mission as the agency, but includes an updated vision and accompanying guiding principles and lays out our new path for the program. Our vision: deliver public assistance funding to our partners in a way that promotes equitable treatment, timely recovery, and resilient rebuilding of communities. Guiding principles: we prioritize customer experience above all else. We are solution-oriented and embody FEMA's core values. We look to maximize flexibility under our authorities to help communities. We share this with you because our engagement and support will help us realize this vision and live by these principles. If together we can listen with empathy, demonstrate FEMA unity to you, our applicants and partners, and make solution-oriented decisions, I know we will find a greater success with helping our communities recover and build back stronger and better than before. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and we will now begin our presentation.
Hello, my name is Amanda Brown, and I am a section chief in the Public Assistance Regulations and Policy Branch at FEMA headquarters. The objective of today's webinar is to provide an overview of the COVID disposition FAQ document that FEMA released, and the agenda for today will be to go through policy and the FAQ, and then some common questions that we have received after that, and time permitting, we will take other questions at the end. We will also try to address any questions or comments that come in through the chat or through the Q&A as we go along. A brief overview of some recent COVID-19 milestones. On January 30th, 2023, the President announced that both the National Emergency Declaration and Public Health Emergency would conclude on May 11th, 2023. On February 10th, 2023, FEMA announced that the COVID-19 incident period would end effective May 11th, 2023 as well. FEMA approved a 90-day extension to the May 11th deadline for projects that would require demobilization, disposition, and/or disposal activities. And as of April 2023, the Public Assistance Program has provided more than $62 billion in COVID funding to state, local, tribal, territorial partners, as well as private nonprofits. to implement the end of the incident period, FEMA had to update two main pieces of guidance. And so the first that we will discuss is the COVID-19 Programmatic Deadlines Interim Policy, version 2, which FEMA released on March 30th, 2023. This policy supersedes version 1 of the Programmatic Deadlines Policy that FEMA released on June 15th, 2022. It establishes PA eligibility and programmatic deadlines applicable to all COVID-19 emergency and major disaster declarations. It also describes the 100% and 90% federal cost share applications and timeframes for those. Provides guidance for the limited eligible work performed up to 90 days from May 11th for demobilization, disposition, or disposal activities. And the other main piece of guidance here is the COVID-19 Disposition FAQ, version 2, which FEMA released on May 5th, 2023. And this FAQ supersedes version 1 of the COVID-19 Disposition FAQ that was released in April of 2022. It applies to all FEMA PA projects funded under COVID-19 emergency or major disaster declarations, as well as equipment or supplies provided by FEMA as direct federal assistance, DFA. Provides answers to frequently asked questions about disposition, disposal, and demobilization for all COVID-19 emergency and major disaster declaration. In version 2, FEMA updated some of the previous responses that were in version 1 of the FAQ. Some of these updates included determining that expired equipment or supplies have a $0 fair market value and therefore do not require disposition. Specified the date used to determine when equipment is no longer needed for the calculation of depreciation or fair market value is based on the work completion deadline of either May 11th, 2023, or information previously provided by an applicant. It also defines aggregate total for supplies, and that means the aggregate total refers to the entire residual inventory of unused supplies funded by FEMA without regard for the individual item or type. And FEMA does not differentiate between individual items of supplies. It also clarifies that for equipment, FEMA will use the 150% declining balance method or straight line depreciation when determining a fair market value. Additional updates include clarifying that no reduction is taken for supplies for small projects during project formulation or at closeout, clarifying that FEMA must determine whether a reduction for fair market value of equipment is necessary prior to an applicant's small project certification and closeout if no reduction was taken for that equipment during small project formulation. It informs applicants the small project threshold increase to $1 million for projects that had not been obligated as of that date for major disasters and emergencies declared on or after March 13th, 2020, which does include COVID declarations. But for unobligated projects to which the new threshold applies, a project that was formulated as a large project will be changed to a small project if appropriate upon obligation. And FEMA will not adjust funding except for a reason articulated in Papa G version 3.1, which is applicable to the COVID events. In addition to those updates, FEMA also provided new language in version 2 related to funding for disposal of eligible PA-funded equipment and supplies, or that FEMA provided as DFA. Funding for disposal may be eligible. Additional information regarding funding for transportation costs to support demobilization, disposition, and disposal activities when reasonable and necessary. Information on funding for maintenance or storage equipment or supplies that is related to demobilization, disposition, and disposal activities for an additional 90 days after May 11th, 2023, requesting time extensions to complete demobilization, disposition, and disposal work after the August 9th deadline, and clarifies that FEMA regional administrators have authority to approve a single time extension when the request is justified based on extenuating circumstances. It also informs applicants that non-competitive procurements under exigent or emergency circumstances that were based solely on the existence of the COVID-19 public health emergency are no longer allowable. And additional new language, it clarifies the types of facilities eligible for demobilization work and costs, including non-congregate shelters, medical care facilities, temporary or expanded, test to treat site, vaccination centers, or any other eligible facilities or sites needing demobilization efforts COVID-19. Also, information related to reimbursing supplies purchased based on a justifiable need to be used or distributed by May 11th, 2023, and any unused supplies becoming part of the applicant's stock, subject to disposition requirements at that point. Considering supplies to be used or distributed upon distribution to the facility and not requiring documentation demonstrating that the receiving entity used the supplies as long as the applicant who distributed the supplies had the legal responsibility to conduct that eligible work. Also clarifies language on eligible demobilization, disposition, and disposal work and costs, including warehousing for eligible PPE and other supplies that exceed a 60-day supply if the supplies were purchased between January 1, 2020 through September 14th, 2020 versus supplies that were purchased on or after September 15th, 2020. There is also detailed information on the application of the 90% federal cost share. So FEMA will apply a 90% federal cost share for demobilization, disposition, and disposal work and costs, including warehousing, performed on or after July 2, 2022. This includes the following work and costs to complete demobilization or disposition or disposal for up to 90 days after May 11th, 2023. So this includes clarifying that employee labor, hours worked for eligible demobilization, disposition, and disposal work performed through August 9th, 2023 may be eligible, as well as purchased supplies. So costs to purchase any necessary supplies to complete eligible demob, disposition, or disposal work used through August 9th, 2023 may be eligible. FEMA only provides PA funding for the purchase of supplies that are projected to be used by the August 9th deadline for that limited work. Purchased equipment, cost to purchase, any necessary equipment to complete eligible demobilization, disposition, and disposal work used through August 9th, 2023, and the cost for usage through August 9th, 2023. Additional information on leased equipment and facilities. Under the 90% federal cost share, lease costs after May 11th, 2023 to complete eligible demob, disposition, disposal used through August 9th, 2023 may be eligible. FEMA may calculate the cost based on a proration of time. FEMA only provides funding for storage, including warehousing costs, that is necessary for up to 90 days to complete demob, disposition, and disposal efforts, and contract costs. Costs for work performed from May 11th through August 9th, 2023 to support eligible demob, disposition, and disposal work may also be eligible. Disposition of real property is also an issue for which we are currently preparing guidance. So if an applicant acquires or improves real property with public assistance funds, disposition and reporting requirements apply when the acquired or improved real property is no longer needed for the originally authorized purpose. FEMA provides disposition instructions when acquired or improved real property is no longer needed for the originally authorized purpose. And the COVID-19 Disposition FAQ version 2 is specific to requirements for equipment and supplies. However, as I mentioned, FEMA is currently working on additional guidance specific to disposition of real property. So that will be forthcoming. So now we will move on to answers to some common questions that we have received on disposition. Where can the COVID-19 policies and guidance documents be accessed? And will the webinar slides be available as well? And the answer is all of the COVID-19 policies and guidance documents are uploaded to FEMA's Public Assistance Resource Library. The slides from this webinar have also been uploaded to Grants Manager and Grants Portal. To access these slides from Grants Manager and Grants Portal, go to the Support Center, and you'll then select the Job Aids icon. And next, you'll select the Training Materials and Tutorials folder. And finally, you will select the COVID-19 Training folder, and you will see this slide deck uploaded to that folder. Next question. An applicant purchased a piece of equipment after May 11th, 2023 to perform demob, disposition, and disposal activities. Will FEMA reimburse the applicant's purchased equipment since the costs were incurred after the work completion deadline of May 11th? Yes, costs to purchase any necessary equipment to complete this eligible demob, disposition, disposal work that used through August 9th, and the cost for the usage through August 9th may be eligible for PA funding. However, equipment purchases used to complete demobilization, disposition, and disposal activities would then be subject to disposition requirements themselves once they were no longer needed for the originally authorized purpose. Next question. Are an applicant's non-congregate sheltering activities eligible after the work completion deadline while the applicant completes its demobilization, disposition, and disposal activities? No. COVID-specific non-congregate sheltering activities related to the sheltering of individuals are ineligible after May 11th, 2023. Costs incurred for work performed after May 11th may be eligible if they are necessary to complete demobilization, disposition, or disposal activities, such as returning the shelter to pre-disaster condition. Next question. Will FEMA fund storage and warehousing costs for PPE after May 11th, 2023? Yes, but only when necessary to complete demob, disposition, and disposal activities. And again, FEMA has provided a 90-day time extension from the end of the incident period on May 11th until August 9th to reimburse eligible storage and warehousing costs. And FEMA regional administrators may issue a single additional 90-day time extension to complete this work until November 7th, 2023, when the request is justified. However, once an applicant completes its demob, disposition, and disposal activities, FEMA will no longer reimburse for storage or warehousing. Next question. The procurement and contracting process to obtain a vendor to complete demob, disposition, and disposal activities alone can take up to 90 days, if not longer. What happens if an applicant has not started these activities within the first 90 days? So the answer is that if the applicant needs additional time beyond the initial 90 days to complete these activities, they must submit a written request for a time extension to FEMA through the recipient with an explanation of the extenuating circumstances beyond its control. And so FEMA regional administrators may extend the August 9th deadline to complete these activities, as I mentioned, an additional 90 days until November 7th, 2023, again, when the request is justified based on extenuating circumstances beyond the recipient or applicant's control. Next, will blanket time extensions for COVID-19 project submissions be granted? The answer is no. FEMA will not provide blanket time extensions for project submissions. However, FEMA has approved the 90-day extension to the emergency work period of performance, again, only for DMOB disposition and disposal activities through August 9th. And as mentioned previously, regional administrators may extend this to November 7th. That said, FEMA will evaluate each time extension request on a case-by-case basis to determine whether the request is justified based on extenuating circumstances beyond the recipient's or applicant's control. Next question. What is the date that triggers disposition requirements? The date used to determine when equipment is no longer needed for the fair market value calculation is based on the work completion deadline of either May 11th, 2023, or information previously provided by an applicant. For example, FEMA would use the actual date of disposition if inventory were accessed an earlier date. Next question is, will FEMA provide PA funding for disposal costs of equipment and supplies that were funded by the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS? No, FEMA will not provide funding for disposal of items acquired through other entities, including other federal agencies, such as HHS. Items that were acquired through funding provided by HHS are subject to the disposition process outlined by HHS. Next, the policy states that FEMA will fund demobilization, disposition, and disposal activities. Will FEMA fund the cost of tractor trailers or similar equipment to transport expired supplies? Yes, FEMA may provide PA funding for transportation costs to support these activities when reasonable and necessary. Eligible costs may include equipment and supplies necessary for proper handling and transport in accordance with federal guidance to support these activities. In addition to disposal, this also includes funding eligible transportation of expired supplies and equipment for donation. And FEMA will provide a one-time reimbursement of eligible costs for transportation from pickup locations, such as a storage facility or a warehouse, to the final site. For example, FEMA may reimburse a single transfer of items from a storage facility or warehouse to a landfill and not transporting items from one storage facility or warehouse to another and then to a landfill. Next question. Will healthcare applicants be able to retain their real property improvements without further obligation to FEMA if the least cost alternative is retaining versus removing those improvements? So FEMA is currently working on additional guidance specific to disposition requirements for real property. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, not able to answer specific real property questions at this time, but I'll take all these questions and information into consideration as we continue to develop the real property disposition guidance. And the next question that we have is, the original disposition FAQ stated that fair market value for equipment and supplies on small projects is addressed during project formulation. Should the applicant notify FEMA if fair market value was not addressed on its small project during project formulation? And the answer is, in version 2 of the disposition FAQ, FEMA clarified that no reduction is taken for supplies for small projects during project formulation or at project closeout because the quantity of supplies for which funding is eligible is an amount that is necessary and reasonable. And so, in other words, FEMA does not expect the aggregate total of unused supplies on small projects to exceed $5,000, which would trigger disposition requirements. So if the small project included purchased equipment, but no reductions were made for fair market value, the applicant must determine whether a reduction is applicable for the equipment prior to certifying completion of all of its small projects. So FEMA would only adjust the small project amount to apply the fair market value reduction if the adjustment were due to an inadvertent error or omission. And so that brings us to the answers to common questions that we have received. And so for any additional information, if you have questions or concerns about COVID-19 programmatic deadlines policy and implementation or the disposition FAQ, please discuss these with your FEMA point of contact. FEMA staff should discuss any questions with their supervisory chain and elevate any issues as necessary. And for questions or concerns that need any further attention, please email questions to the email address listed here. And so that concludes this presentation.
If you are working with any documents used for a FEMA grant, you are responsible for safeguarding personally identifiable information, or PII. PII refers to anything that can be used to directly or indirectly identify an individual. Some examples of PII are names, addresses, social security numbers, and financial account information. This type of information must not be uploaded into Grants Portal or Grants Manager. To report corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and/or misconduct, contact the Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General by phone at 1-800-323-8603 or via the website or mailing address listed on the screen now. Procurement requirements are among the most complicated parts of the PA grant process, and noncompliance can result in deobligation of funding. Please make sure that you are following FEMA's procurement guidance for recipients and subrecipients. Federal requirements for procurement and contracting are described in 2 CFR Part 200. The Procurement Disaster Assistance Team, or PDAT, offers some training and tools on their website, www.fema.gov/grants/procurement. For technical assistance with Grants Portal or Grants Manager, you can call the PA Grants Portal Grants Manager hotline at 866-337-8448. National hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. The hotline can also be reached by email at FEMA-recovery-PA-grants@fema.dhs.gov. We have many other recorded webinars and tutorial videos available on our YouTube channel. You can find them by searching for FEMA Grants Portal on YouTube or by navigating to the Support Center in Grants Portal or Grants Manager.
Thank you for watching.